There's a moment, a few years after you buy an electric bike, that almost nobody warns you about. You go to charge it like you have 1,000 times before, and something has changed. The range that used to get you to work and back barely gets you there. The battery that once felt bottomless now dies halfway through the ride. And when you walk into a shop to fix it, you discover the number that the glossy adverts never mentioned. Because the part that's failing, the heart of the whole machine, can cost you hundreds, sometimes over 1,000 to replace. And if you're unlucky, it can't be replaced at all. So before you buy one of these bikes, or before you buy your next one, let's ask the question the marketing carefully avoids. When you buy an electric bike, what are you really buying? And what happens on the day the battery dies? Let's start by being honest about what an electric bike actually is, because the way it's sold hides the truth. It's sold as a bicycle, a normal bike, but easier, faster, with a helpful push when you need it. And in the way it rides, that's exactly what it feels like. But mechanically, that's not the whole story. Strip away the marketing, and an electric bike is really three things bolted onto a bicycle: a motor, a battery, and the electronics that tie them together and decide how it all behaves. The frame, the brakes, the gears, most of that is still just a bike. But those three electric parts are where the magic lives, where the money goes, and crucially, where the problems hide. And of the three, one matters more than everything else combined: the battery. It's the most expensive component. It works the hardest. And unlike the frame, it is quietly dying from the very first day you own it.
But before we get to that, let's talk about the motor, because it's where most buyers make their first mistake, and it's a mistake the spec sheet encourages. There are two main kinds of motor, and the difference between them shapes the whole feel of the bike. The first is a hub motor, built into the wheel itself. It simply pushes or pulls the wheel along. It's simpler, it's cheaper, and if it ever needs replacing, that's usually a few hundred. But it can feel a little artificial, like something shoving you from behind rather than a natural boost. The second kind is a mid-drive motor, mounted down at the pedals, at the crank. Instead of driving the wheel directly, it works through the bike's own gears, which makes it feel far more natural, like your own legs suddenly got stronger. It climbs better, it rides better, and riders who try it rarely go back. But it's more complex, it's more expensive, and here's the catch that matters: it's almost always proprietary, tied to a single brand system. Replacing one can cost anywhere from several hundred to well over 1,000. And this brings us to the single most important thing most e-bike buyers get wrong. They shop for watts. The adverts shout big wattage numbers, 750, 1,000, and buyers assume bigger is better. But watts are only half the story, and often the less important half. What you actually feel when you pull away from a stop and when you grind up a steep hill is torque. Torque is the turning force, and it's what really pushes you. A clever mid-drive motor with high torque can feel dramatically stronger than a hub motor with a much bigger watt number and low torque. So the headline figure that sells the bike is often not the figure that matters.
If you buy on watts alone, you can end up with a bike that looks powerful on paper and feels weak on the road. Don't buy the number, buy the feeling, and the feeling comes from torque. And there's a second, quieter thing that shapes the feel even more than the motor itself, something almost no advert ever mentions. It's the sensor, the little component that decides how the motor responds to you. There are two kinds, and once you've felt the difference, you can never unfeel it. The cheaper kind is a cadence sensor. It only knows one thing: whether the pedals are turning or not. So when you start pedaling, the motor simply switches on, often with a lurch, a shove that arrives all at once whether you wanted it or not. It works, but it feels like a machine reacting to a switch. The better kind is a torque sensor, and it changes everything. Instead of just noticing that you're pedaling, it measures how hard you're pushing, and it feeds in power in exact proportion. Push gently, and it helps gently. Push hard, and it surges with you. It doesn't feel like a motor shoving you along. It feels like your own legs quietly becoming twice as strong. So much of what people describe as a bike feeling premium, natural, alive, is really just a good torque sensor doing its work. It's one of the most important parts of the whole experience, and
It ages every time you charge and drain it, counted in cycles, and it ages simply with the passing of time, whether you ride it or not. Most good e-bike batteries are rated for somewhere between 500 and 1,000 full charge cycles before they drop to around 80% of their original capacity. In everyday terms, that's often just 3 to 5 years of normal riding. The very best cells, well cared for, might stretch to 5 to 7. But make no mistake, the clock is ticking from day one, and it ticks even while the bike sits in your garage untouched. You'll know when it's happening, because the signs are unmistakable once you know to look for them. The range collapses. A charge that used to take you 40 kilometers now barely does 20. The bike takes longer to charge than it used to. On a hill or when you accelerate, the power sags, that sudden feeling of the motor running out of breath. Sometimes the motor cuts out entirely, even when the display still swears there's charge left. And there is one sign you must never ignore. If a battery ever swells, cracks, or leaks, stop using it immediately. That's not a performance problem, that's a genuine safety hazard. But the everyday reality for most owners is simpler and quieter. One day you realize the magic has faded, and you go looking for a new battery. And that's where the real shock waits. Because replacing an e-bike battery is expensive, and the reasons why tell you everything about what you actually bought. For most bikes, a new battery runs somewhere from $300 to $900, and for premium, proprietary.
Inside is a battery management system, a little computer that has to talk perfectly to your specific motor and controller. There's certified safety hardware, thermal protection, software that has to match. When you buy a big brand integrated e-bike, that new battery isn't just cells, it's a licensed, brand-specific electronic component. Premium e-bike feels so good. Its beautiful, seamless, integrated system is exactly the thing that locks you in. A battery has to match not just in shape and voltage and connector, but its internal computer has to speak the same language as the motor. On the most integrated, most premium systems, that means only one battery in the world will work. Theirs, the expensive one. There's no shopping around, no cheaper alternative, no third-party bargain. You are, in a very real sense, renting the right to keep your own bike running from the company that made it. Now, on simpler, more generic systems, often the humbler hub motor bikes with standard connectors, you can fit a cheaper third-party battery, as long as you're careful about the quality of the cells and the safety electronics. So there's a genuine trade here. The more integrated and polished the bike, the better it rides today, and the more tightly it binds you tomorrow. The more generic and basic, the more freedom you keep, and the less refined it feels. That's not a scam, it's a design choice, and understanding which side of it you're buying is everything.
And there's a deeper version of this lock-in that turns a bad day into a disaster, and it connects to something happening across the whole bike industry right now. What happens if the brand itself disappears? We've seen in recent years e-bike companies go bankrupt, get sold, or simply walk away from a market, leaving owners stranded. And here is why that's so much worse for an electric bike than for a normal one. If a regular bike brand dies, your bike is mostly made of universal parts. You can keep it running almost forever. But an electric bike lives or dies by its proprietary system. When the brand that made your battery, your motor, and your electronics vanishes, so does any hope of ever replacing them. Your beautiful, powerful, expensive machine can become an object that cannot be repaired at any price. Not because it's broken beyond fixing, but because the one company that could fix it no longer exists. A cheap e-bike from an unknown brand that might not be there in 3 years isn't just a cheaper bike, it's a much bigger gamble than anyone tells you. All of this collides brutally in the used market, and it's where the most money gets lost or saved. Electric bikes depreciate hard. Many lose a quarter to 40% of their value in the very first year, and then 10 to 20% a year after that. Cheaper direct-to-consumer bikes fall fastest. Premium bikes with respected motors hold on a little better. But the single biggest factor in what a used e-bike is actually worth isn't the scratches on the frame or the age of the tires. It's the health of the battery. A 3-year-old bike with a strong battery can be a wonderful deal.
The exact same bike with a tired battery, quietly sitting at 70% and heading downward, is a 500+ problem waiting to land on the new owner. So if you ever buy a used electric bike, this is the rule that matters more than any other. Do not buy it on looks. Buy it on battery health. Many systems will show you the charge cycles and the true state of the battery through an app, if you know to ask. Insist on seeing it. Favor bikes with low mileage, and favor brands that still exist and still make the parts. Without proof of battery health, you're not buying a bargain, you're buying a mystery. Now, I don't want any of this to sound like electric bikes are a bad idea, because for the right rider, they are genuinely transformative, and that matters just as much as the warnings. For the commuter who ditches the car, for the older rider who thought their cycling days were behind them, for someone coming back from injury, for anyone facing brutal hills or hauling kids and cargo, an e-bike doesn't just add convenience, it gives back freedom. For those riders, the running costs, the battery, the servicing are a small price for a machine that changes how they move through the world. Cargo and specialist e-bikes, ridden hard and daily, more than earn their keep. The problem was never the electric bike. The problem is the uninformed purchase, the buyer who thinks they're getting a normal bike with a motor and only later discovers the real cost living inside it. And that real cost deserves to be spelled out plainly, because it's the part the sticker price hides. Buying the bike is only the entrance fee. Over its life, you may replace that battery once, maybe more, at hundreds a time.
If the motor fails and it's a proprietary mid-drive, that's potentially another 4 figures. Even the ordinary electrical gremlins have a price, a diagnostic fee just to find out what's wrong before anyone fixes anything. And because these bikes are heavier and faster than a normal bike, the ordinary parts wear faster too. The brakes, the chain, the tires, all working harder under the extra weight and speed. None of this makes an e-bike a bad buy, but it means the honest price of ownership is the sticker plus a running tab that a normal bicycle simply doesn't have. A regular bike, cared for, can cost you almost nothing for years. An electric bike is always quietly metering. So let's turn all of this into a way to buy well, whichever kind of rider you are. First, when you shop, look past the watts and feel the torque, because the number that sells the bike is rarely the one that matters. Second, understand from the very beginning that the battery is not a permanent part of the bike. It's a consumable, with a life of maybe 3 to 5 years and a replacement price of hundreds, sometimes more, and factor that into the true cost before you fall in love with the sticker. Third, think hard about the trade between integration and freedom. A seamless premium system rides beautifully and locks you in completely. A more generic system feels less magical but leaves you options when the battery dies. Neither is wrong, but you should choose it on purpose, not by accident. Fourth, weigh the brand not just on how the bike rides today, but on whether that company will still be around and still making your parts in 5 years. And finally, if you buy used, let the battery decide. Its health is the real price tag, no matter what the listing says.
Because here is the truth that sits underneath the whole electric revolution. When you buy an ordinary bicycle, you own it, completely and forever. A simple machine you can keep alive for decades. When you buy an electric bike, you're buying something closer to a phone or a laptop, a powerful device with a perishable heart, and often a single company holding the keys. That's not a reason to avoid them. Ridden by the right person, an e-bike is one of the best things to happen to cycling in a generation. It's a reason to buy with your eyes fully open. Know what you're really paying for. Respect the battery as the living, dying, expensive heart of the machine. And never forget that with an electric bike, the price on the tag is only the beginning of the story. Understand that, and the e-bike becomes exactly what it should be, a machine that gives you freedom instead of quietly taking your money. Get it wrong, and one day you'll go to charge it and finally understand what you actually bought.